The Answer.
71 at O'Hare. Next news at 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Don't forget that you can watch Chicago's Morning Answer on the Income Store live video stream every morning at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Why aren't more people encouraging like me? I'm so lonely, so lonely, so lonely inside real lonely.
Sure, Kim Jongun didn't want to suffer the fate of his old man and live his life in isolation. So he agreed to Trump's,
Trump's tweet. It started with a tweet. You had me with hello.
I was going to say booty call, but maybe that's a little
butt
aggressive. No, it wasn't accidental. Trump. I'm over in Osaka at the G20 thing, so Kim Jong-un, maybe I'll drop by. An imaginary line shouldn't divide our love, and it didn't. President Trump becoming the first sitting U.S. president to cross the MDL into North Korea and have another meeting with President Kim Jong-un. Here's President Trump on his historic step.
We're in Japan for the G20. We came over and I said, hey, I'm over here. I want to call up Chairman Kim. And we got to meet, and stepping across that line was a great honor. A lot of progress has been made. A lot of friendships have been made, and this has been in particular a great friendship. So I just want to thank you. That was very quick notice, and I want to thank you.
And if Kim Jong-un makes a significant step forward as well, perhaps they could reconvene at the White House.
I did. Actually, at some point, it'll all happen. If it all works out, at some point, that'll all happen.
And how it went down, I mean, give him an inch, he takes 20 steps.
My friend.
Good to see you again.
이런 데서 각하를 만나게 될 줄 생각 못했어요.
I've never expected to meet you at this place.
That's good. That's my honor. Would you like me to step across?
각하께서 한 발자국 건너시면 사상 처음으로 우리 땅을 밟으시는 미국 대통령이 되십니다.
If your excellency take a step forward, you will be the first U.S. president to cross the line.
I'd be very proud to do that. Okay.
I'd be very proud to do that, and proud he was.
And he had some some strong associates with him.
He had muscle in there.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Haven't seen a chop block like the one Stephanie Grisham threw since Mark Bortz was clearing holes for Walter Payton. Here's Stephanie Grisham help getting the U.S. press pool camera into the sit-down between Kim Jong-un and President Trump.
U.S. is good. Hey, he's good. U.S. cool. U.S. cool. Stop.
Yeah. And
we needed a seat at the table.
Yeah,
she boxed him out and then, give him a karate chop.
That's a good start. First week on the gig. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Jeb Babbin, former United States Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator. Jed, the greatest single step since Neil Armstrong?
Well, I think that's a little too much of an exaggeration.
Yeah, I think so, too.
It's a good thing. Look, I mean, talking is better than fighting, at least most times. This really didn't accomplish anything, this visit, but it's a good gesture. Trump's politics and his diplomacy are all very personal. And, he wanted to see Kim, and, Kim said, okay, fine. So, it really didn't accomplish much of anything. But, again, it's not a negative. It's a positive, at least generally.
Well, what do you think it would take for North Korea to feel secure without nuclear weapons? I mean, what's in it for them if they, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's possible, Amy. I think they're never going to give up their nuclear weapons peacefully. And frankly, China is not going to enable them to do that, not allow them to do that. So I don't think there's really any chance. And, the real issue here is that the negotiations can go on, and certainly they should, but we have to be realistic about it. The negotiations are at the point where Kim is demanding that we end all sanctions against North Korea, in exchange for them even giving us a list of where their nukes are located. So there's not a chance that we're coming even remotely close to an agreement on them dismantling the nuclear weapons, and I don't expect we ever will. So again, talking is better than shooting most of the time.
But I mean, part of foreign policy are these charm offensives, like President Trump has engaged with Kim Jongun, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's as you're right. It's just a part of diplomacy. Much of diplomacy is frankly blue smoke and mirrors, and this is nothing more than that. But it's not harmful. We don't have any evidence, at least I don't have any evidence, that the North Koreans are getting ready to do another nuclear test or to fire another ICBM around Japan or something like that. So, absent those provocations, there's going to be some bluff and bluster on both sides. And frankly, it doesn't change the situation, but at least things don't get worse.
There's more substantive movement with respect to President Trump's foreign policy with the Chinese after relaxing the ability of American companies to supply Huawei to some extent. And Larry Kudlow was on with Chris Wallace over the weekend, responding to questions about the president's move in this direction, this sort of temporary trade truce, and also some criticisms from GOP senators about essentially allowing for Huawei to re-engage with American companies, since this is little more, they allege, than a spy corporation for the Chinese government. Here's Kudlow explaining it. Get your reaction.
This is not a general amnesty, if you will. Huawei will remain on the so-called entity list, where there are serious export controls, and in any national security inferences or suggestions, there won't be any licenses. But having said that, I think all that's going to happen is the Commerce Department will grant some temporary additional licenses where there's a general availability. I mean, for example, some of the chip makers in the United States are selling products that are, frankly, widely available from other countries, and we don't think there's any national security.
Is this a smart move by President Trump, Jed?
Yeah, it is. We're not enabling the Chinese to get anything that's going to be any use to them in national security. Huawei is a very big danger. That's why they're not being permitted to participate in the construction of 5G cell networks in this country. And they're not going to be getting any other technologies from us at this point. So it's a good move. It makes Trump more moderate in terms of what Xi is demanding, Xi Jinping, the president of China. And Xi can go back and say, well, I got him to do this. So it's not a big deal. I think it's not bad. And, again, if it reopens the trade talks with China, that's a good thing. Again, whether that is going to produce anything of value to us, that's another matter.
All right, let's move over to Iran. I mean, obviously, Iran attacked oil tankers, and then they shot down an unmanned American drone that was probably about the size of a Cessna, but millions of dollars worth of equipment there. Do you think President Trump made the right call by not attacking?
That's really tough, Amy. I think that he needed to do more than he did. I think that calling off the attack at the last second, 10 minutes before the attack was supposed to be delivered, is not good thinking on his part. You either do it or you don't. The question of what are you going to do in terms of killing a number of Iranians, okay, disproportionality is a big deal. We have that problem every time we do anything against anybody. There are people saying, well, it's disproportionate to what you suffered. I wrote on September 11th, 01, and it would appear in the Washington Times, it did appear in the Washington Times September 12th, the day after the 9/11 attacks, that any talk of proportionality in response to those attacks was out of line, that President Bush should just ignore people who argued proportionality and just be ruthless and devastating in our response. In this case, the Iranians shot down a drone, worth a couple of $1 million. I think the Global Hawk is, a $5 or $6 million aircraft. And it's a big deal, but it's not that big a deal. The Iranians didn't kill anybody. If they had, we would have to have responded in terms of a military strike on them. But I think at this point, what the president did, we can Monday morning quarterback it. I might have done something different, but I think it was probably the right response.
And is he playing Iran right in the larger sense of it, in terms of allowing the sanctions to continue to work? He imposed new sanctions that zero in on the ruling mullahs more directly, but those sanctions have had a crippling effect on Iranian's economy, and some foreign policy observers are arguing that Iran's behavior is their way of indicating they'd really like to talk because of the crippling effect sanctions is having.
Well, that's the latter part of that is nonsense. Those so-called experts. Iran is not like us. They have been responding to us in calibrated ways since the 1979 revolution, and they've calibrated their responses and their attacks in a manner that we would not respond militarily. They're still trying to play that game, but they're upping the ante. They're willing to take greater risks, attacking the tankers, shooting down our drone. The fact of the matter is that what Mr. Trump did in this response, I don't think is going to moderate their behavior at all. And that's really the question. Do our sanctions have an effect? Yes, they do. It's crippling their economy, strangling their economy. It's a great idea. But what is next? If we're going to do more, we need to be doing more in cyber attacks. I heard a rumor that there was a cyber attack against Iranian missile emplacements, missile facilities by our NSA people, and that's a very good thing to do. So more of that needs to be done, and quite frankly, if one drop of American blood is shed, we should not be very restrained in responding against Iran.
What do you think of the competing Marshall Plans? Everybody's got a Marshall Plan, domestic Marshall Plans, international Marshall Plans. Jared Kushner talked about one for the Middle East, most specifically Palestinian-controlled territories. And then on the debate on Wednesday and Thursday night, you heard candidates talking about a Marshall Plan for the Northern Triangle countries to stem the tide of migrants to our border.
Well, I don't think any of them, Mr. Kushner, or certainly not the Democrats, understand the magnitude of what the Marshall Plan really was. It was tens of billions of dollars of food aid, financial aid, and other kinds of aid being shipped directly on American ships to Europe to prevent them from starving. After World War II, the winter of 1946-47 was one of the harshest in memory in Europe, and they frankly couldn't have lived. Millions of people would have died without it. I think the idea of aid to the Palestinians is something that's never going to happen because, quite frankly, they won't accept it. And I think going to Guatemala and Nicaragua and Honduras and saying we're going to give you tons of money to stop the problems you have there, it's just going to be money down the well. I don't think we should do that at all. And I think the Democrats suggesting that just indicates how much more they're willing to spend to achieve nothing. And they're certainly willing to spend a lot of our money